Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie. I am the senior editor here, and I am thrilled to bring you a discussion on contact center AI and the opportunities and risks for insurers. And joining me for this conversation are Jake Gardner, a senior account executive for insurance and financial services at Puzzle, and Simon Foote, head of customer contact transformation at PA Consulting. Now, thanks very much to both of you for joining me for this chat, and let's get right into the discussion. And Jake, let's start with you. I don't know if you could share some of your thoughts on where the current opportunities for insurers to leverage AI within their contact center experiences lie.
Yeah, great question, Charlie. So look, let me start my answer by saying I think it depends on the size of the company, the history attached to it, and what their key objectives are. So, for example, clearly a more mature insurance business is not going to have the same challenges as a new entrant to the market, and possibly they've got a better chance to deliver more modern technology. I think as well, there's now more than ever pressure from regulators, so Consumer Duty introduced by the Financial Conduct Authority. So these elements are driving a lot of discussion around AI. I think in terms of where the opportunities lie, on the customer-facing side, I'm a massive advocate, as you know, because we've spoken about this topic before, around natural language processing. I think I would always strongly recommend organizations investing into NLP, given that data, quite frankly, is telling us voice is not declining as quickly as we thought it would. NLP, is the ability simply to route an interaction based on spoken language. So, for example, please tell us in a few words why you're contacting us today. And look, it's got the power to drastically improve the potential of intelligent self-service, and also organizations will have access to new information detailing why exactly customers are contacting them. I think as well, lastly, to round this off, would be smart investments into AI technologies that help assist agents in their daily activities that can deliver significant tangible benefits. So, for example, real-time agent assist, so the ability to proactively suggest a knowledge management article, dependent on where that conversation is going, can dramatically increase first contact resolution, a key driver we know for cost reduction. And then lastly, I think automated contact summarization at the end of a call. So summarizing what has been said, what has been committed to by the organization, that helps to reduce average handle time, but crucially, it remains consistency, or in fact, it enforces consistency in customer contact notes. And as we know, data is a large challenge for any organization, big or small. And I think actually these are often overlooked. When you look at the market, people tend to point to the likes of chatbot technology, etc. That is so important, but there's so many facets of AI that can be leveraged in truly innovative ways to deliver benefits across the entire life cycle of a customer contact. So those are the three bits of technologies I'd point out today on this specific question.
Awesome. Yeah, lots of really great examples there, Jake. I don't know, Simon, if you would maybe add to that list in any way?
No, I agree. I agree with Jake, actually. I mean, we tend to look at this through the lens of insurers, like most organizations, are looking for opportunities to increase revenue, reduce cost to serve, improve customer satisfaction and promote loyalty. And I think increasingly, and this has sort of come into our sort of dashboards over the last couple of years, has been the agent experience as well, because we know it's really hard to attract and retain skilled people, and the more we automate, the complexity of that frontline role gets greater and greater, and potentially the cost associated with it. So I think it's how we apply those technologies against a clear understanding of those levers is actually really important. So if we take something like, quite rightly, Consumer Duty, which is almost the fifth lens there around kind of regulatory conformity and compliance, it's hard to actually identify vulnerability. It's hard to identify financial distress. Yes, we can do that through codifying lots of systems and gathering lots of data, but oftentimes that falls down at the point of interaction between the agent and the customer. So putting in place additional support structures like agent assist to guide and handhold the agent through some of those potential signs of vulnerability and distress is really important, actually, when we're looking to be compliant with things like Consumer Duty and other, fraud based regulations. I think the post-call transcription element talks very obviously to the efficiency gain lens that we need to look through. But I also think that post-call analytics for reinforcement of behaviours, for proactively identifying non-conforming or non-compliant conversations, be those from a regulatory requirement or even against our service outcomes, is really interesting. Actually, the part which is really challenging for customers at the moment, I think, or for our clients, is how do we kind of bring all of those aggregated sets of data, all those different components into a proper single view of the customer that leverages AI to surface the right knowledge, articles or intelligence through those conversations in a simplistic way on that agent real estate, so that we don't add complexity to their job. In fact, we make their job easier to let them get on with it. So, and I have a few examples of that as we go through. But and I think just final point, of course, we can't not talk about chatbots, voice bots. I think that world is really opening up now. I mean, the market is littered with poorly designed chatbots, much like the IVRs that we used to build. We put them in place during COVID as a sticking plaster or a deflection technique, and sadly many of those still persist in the industry. So the next generation of voice bots and chatbots need to be better, and they need to leverage the opportunity of the large language models that we're all getting increasingly familiar with. And this presents a real opportunity when designed well and really thought through.
Yeah, again, lots of really great stuff there. And it strikes me just how many opportunities there are for insurers from both of your answers there to improve customer experiences with contact center AI. But kind of as brands try and take like a holistic approach to this and kind of consider where they start, I sense there maybe is a risk of brands perhaps potentially implementing AI only to save money and not to kind of make money, if that makes sense. I don't know, Jake, if that's something that you see out there in the market.
Yeah, I do. And I think, if we're honest, the market has a little bit of a role to play in that specific messaging. Because I think when we talk about AI, we tend to focus on the efficiencies that AI can deliver for an organization. And that's not always the case. I think actually we also need to look at the opportunity that AI can help organizations make money. And that's one of the things here at Puzzle we're really wanting to help address. So when you think about, for example, automated quality monitoring and the fact that you're able to highlight specific calls where special attention needs to be placed on the customer, it isn't always about driving compliance or reducing average handle time or driving first contact resolution. It's about supporting the agent on their specific journey, enabling them to do a better job ultimately. So another example would be AI helping assist in the sale of a new insurance policy. By being able to make that journey as smooth as possible for the customer and agent, success is guaranteed. And then lastly, it all comes back to data for me, because I think truly that is what the biggest advantage of AI is for any organization. It's access to raw, unadulterated data that will enable you to make the right decisions for your current predicament at that certain point in time. It's no longer guesswork. So for example, I spoke with a large building society, and we're talking about natural language processing specifically and what it could help them achieve. And one of the things that we started to identify very quickly is that getting a subset of calls come into the contact center that was related to unclear marketing assets. So for example, it was an online only offer, but people were phoning into the contact center to speak to agents because that aspect wasn't clear. Without technologies like natural language processing, you're kind of guessing in terms of your current demand that's coming into the contact center. So those insights are really key. And I think actually it is due time to start changing the rhetoric and challenging the rhetoric. Let's focus on the areas where AI can deliver not only efficiencies, but support agents in their quest to handle customer inquiries better.
Yeah, and I think that also leads on to a very interesting discussion around how to kind of monitor the performance of AI, not only through kind of the lens of maybe improvements in average handling time, but also through gains in agent performance and through automated QA and things. You can measure that pretty well, as you noticed. And I think that's another fascinating conversation. I do want to carry on talking about some of the risks maybe involved within contact center AI and pass over to you now, Simon. I don't know if you see any opportunities for contact centers to kind of better focus their time when it comes to contact center AI?
I think it's sort of a build on what Jake was saying, actually, but we worked with an insurer who had 250,000 transfers between departments a year. So that's a pretty good start point, right? To identify that something's not working. Now that had multiple arms to it, as you can imagine. The first of those is it clearly denoted that the IVR or the the screening that was happening up front was not particularly effective, or was driving agents, customers down the wrong channel. So we look at that and we kind of understand how do we better streamline those initial triaging type applications. The second thing it starts to reveal is we've got inappropriate or incorrect skilling, because what we found is we're going through I want to buy a product journey, and we get delivered to an agent who doesn't actually have the skill to sell that particular product. So they may be able to sell pets, but they can't sell car or words to that effect, right? So therefore the need to transfer to another department was causing further transfers there. But what do we do about that? I think the debate is now, because of AI, starting to open up again around the potential for that universal agent operating model, and how do we use AI to upskill and simplify processes so that it is in fact easier to have a multi-dimensional agent being able to handle multiple product types, and the restrictions on that historically have been complexity in processes, lots of different nuances around the different policy types, the difficulty of navigating around multiple systems, training time excuse me, time to competence being 12 weeks just to get, a simple flow, so, largely because of system constraints, right? If we can start breaking down those and simplifying them, that really does start to open up that universal agent operating model. And that becomes really important for revenue generative tasks as well, because we are in a one and done situation. We can get a better view of total product holding, or customers like you also bought products like this, delivered through an individual agent who's taking ownership of that customer and providing them that full portfolio. So I think that's an interesting and a emerging or re-emergence of a debate we've had for many years. Of course, our friends in forecasting and planning will be having kittens at this point around how on earth do we start to monitor and forecast and plan for those sorts of eventualities. But again, that's an opportunity around how can AI actually help with better, more predictive demand management, intraday management, long-term forecasting around much more, with a greater level of fidelity around, patterns and trends and demand. So I think we need to kind of bear those things in mind. I think your question was around what are the risks associated with AI, Charlie. I went off on a bit of a ramble there, but I hope that was okay. I think, now is not the time to be talking about the kind of ethical elements of getting AI right. There's that's a key area that we need to be aware of, and there's lots of conversations to be had around that more generally. I think our view on where organisations are is actually the human in the loop element is critical at this stage in the evolution of AI, right? I think there's always a fear of bots going rogue. There's lots of examples of bad PR from either hallucinations in the bot journey or inappropriate answers coming through, right? And that creates a nervousness. And I think the way around that is we are at the stage where we use AI to surface and support the agent whilst we learn and we develop and the models learn and develop to a point where that monitoring requires less. But right now this is very much about humans powered by bots in for the most part, with the exception sometimes of course around some of the more traditional omni-channel chatbot type areas. Even though you need the controls there, we're more used to controlling those in that way. But the risk of getting it wrong is clearly if we do miss fraudulent a bit of fraudulent activity, or a customer committing fraud, or we don't pick up on a vulnerability or a financial distress, clearly there's regulatory harm that can be, or regulatory interventions there as a consequence of that harm to customers. So we do need to measure and monitor and be really diligent in our operating models about how we factor that in and build it in.
Yeah, and that's a key point actually that I do want to come back to later in this conversation, because as you mentioned, the regulatory concerns are kind of big within the sector, especially. I do kind of want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of those risks too, and potentially discuss even others. I know, Jake, you've talked before about the blind optimism that contact centers often have when it comes to AI. I don't know if you could speak to that in some way.
Yeah, so I think it's one where I can dovetail beautifully from Simon's answer there. Because what I loved about his answer is it talks about the wide spectrum of AI technology. So all of the subset of AI solutions that can be leveraged by an organization at any point in time. And I think blind optimism by itself potentially has a risk of sounding quite negative. But what I mean by that is that often the market is talking a lot about technology like chatbot. Those are the focus areas that are coming to the fore for organizations. And I think for the first time in many years in this industry, artificial intelligence is now a topic being discussed at board level. The reality is that omni-channel is super important. Getting customer access to specific channels that they want to use to contact you as a business, that's always been important. But perhaps it hasn't always had the lens of being discussed in the boardroom. So organizations are now being told or being targeted to get out there and start talking to vendors about AI and how AI can impact their organization in a positive way. And I think, like anything, AI has to be specific to your business and your specific set of challenges at that point in time. So I'll give you an example. We spoke to an organization, they came to us, they were convinced that they wanted to go ahead and deliver chatbot capability. The reality is that after helping jointly analyze the reasons behind this decisions, we concluded that delivering a chatbot would just have the effect of more calls coming into the contact center. And actually, they'd be better served delivering live chat capability initially. Because I think the reality is that AI, whilst exciting for many organizations, it's only as strong as your foundations. The foundations have to be solid first before you can start building in that AI capability. And I think if we're objective, there's still work to do from a perspective of organizations improving those foundations, delivering simple functionality first, simple changes. It sounds simple, they can still deliver significant benefits. And I think also it doesn't help that understanding AI, it's a moving feast, and that needs to be understood together in tandem with a supplier that you trust. If implemented correctly against concrete use cases, it can really be game changing and deliver significant benefits. But the reality is, in my opinion, I think what we're going to see is 50% of projects going really well and delivering value, maybe not 50% on the other side, but a handful of projects where organizations have gone ahead and they've delivered AI capability because they wanted to prove that they could do something quickly, but never really getting the return on investments at the end of the project. And I think chatbot's a great example because everyone speaks about chatbot as being the key to everything. But I think the reality is AI at this stage, to Simon's point, beautifully said earlier, it's about humans and bots working in tandem. I think that's where the key benefits of AI are for organizations at this point in time. Chatbots can be very powerful, but I still think they're at the stage where they're more powerful if you're dealing with programmatic and known data sets. So you've got known data sets and it's a programmatic chatbot. And whilst that's not ChatGPT or it's generative AI or leveraging large language models, it's delivering value. There's a simple known purpose there. For some organizations, they may be better served with generative AI, but the reality is that's at this stage, at this point, whilst it's super important, and we for example, that's capability that we have and we're often talking to customers about, it starts with truly understanding why you want to go and invest in AI. Why now? Lastly, just to close off my answer with the ethics piece, because I think that's actually a very interesting point that Simon raised. We know that legislation is going to get tighter when it comes to AI. So it's really important that you invest in technology from a vendor that has one eye in the future. The AI Act is going to change how we implement AI. It's going to change how organizations perceive AI and actually analyze the risks as well as the advantages. So the ethics piece is really interesting, and actually investing in technology where there's some guardrails in terms of how you're delivering that capability, and you're doing so in a way that's tested, that's sound, and actually is future-proofed, and you're not having to pivot how you've delivered a solution because you're an early adopter.
I think you're exactly right. Charlie, it feels like AI ethics would be a really good future session to talk about and think about. But if I can just make one point from what Jake said, the number of clients that I work with where there's a board directive to the operations to say, how are we using AI, right? And in a way, that's a blessing and a curse, right? What are we doing about it? Where can we deploy it? There is a reality that we're still in some parts struggling to get the basics right within our operations. And just to illustrate it for purposes of this call, is it really right that we start thinking about some of the more complex cases for generative AI if we're still using Excel and Witchcraft to do our forecasting and planning, right? And I mean, it works, of course it works, and there's a scale associated with it, but I think organizations have to be, taking a bit of an inward view on what capabilities do they actually have to be able to productionize AI at that scale, make sure we've got the operating model, make sure we've got the AI competence to be able to continually evolve and develop, in these areas. And actually, can we do, a think big, start small, test and learn, iterative type model, right? A lot of insurers will be encumbered with legacy CRMs, legacy policy admin systems that are, by their nature, oftentimes quite impenetrable unless we start to unlock through better integrations and better architecture, which can all be done, but it needs thinking through. So how do we, to make the point, how do we think big and start small and build an organization around it that is, it facilitates and enables, and those that can do that will be those that win in this market, in my opinion.
Yeah, again, a really good point. And, that philosophy of kind of crawl, walk, run, sort of with AI is been a theme for a number of years now. And I guess with these conversations growing in prevalence, that fact hasn't changed. You do see lots of really good use cases of that, of maybe a brand. It starts with automated call summaries, as Jake noted first, and you can gauge intent better, and then you can start kind of seeing what your main demand drivers are, and then you can build good customer contact handling strategies from those. And Simon, actually, you gave a really great case study earlier. I don't know if there's maybe another one that springs to mind of an insurer specifically that kind of leveraged AI very well within its contact center operations.
Yeah, it was a really interesting engagement we had with this particular client, actually. And as is often the case in the insurance world, excuse me, the question of entitlement, am I entitled to make a claim? Have I got the right policy to be able to claim for this item? Is often a preoccupation for organisations to establish entitlement, but also for customers to try and kind of suggest they might be entitled when they might not be. So that challenge of entitlement is quite difficult. And in this instance, we had a customer who, in order to establish entitlement, required the agent to navigate through 6 different systems to try and piece together the component parts to try and establish, what policy this the customer had. And bear in mind that oftentimes we're getting access to our insurance through multiple different channels. It might be part of our banking products, it might be part of our vehicle products, it might be part of our TV package. So and each of those will have different policy sort of entitlements and structures and setups, right? It's really hard, right? It's really hard for an agent to kind of work that all out, right? So what does that do? What that means is we've got a customer on the phone and we've got an agent having to be really skilled to navigate through lots of different systems and hopefully get it right at the end of it, right? So what do we do in this instance? We we built a consolidated agent desktop, and I think that agent desktop is a really important part of leveraging AI actually, and how we present that to agents to be able to make their job better and actually therefore improve the outcomes for customers. And within that agent desktop, we looked at how do we aggregate all of those disparate data sets using AI to be able to present that at the point of interaction to the agent. And those data sets encompass what was the IVR behavior, what did they do as they came through the IVR, what was their online web behavior, what's their history in terms of historic claims or historic conversations with us. Obviously, then, how do we surface the key elements of the policy document to be able to pinpoint in real time, this is the bit, Simon is saying he's insured for his watch, actually he's only insured up to this value for his watch, as an example, and presenting that information to the agent within that desktop. Of course, we then built into that the need to auto-transcribe so that we saved more time. But what we actually ended up doing there was reduced leakage in terms of claims leakage and time spent on approving claims that were not due. We actually reduced the time it took to take the customer through the claims journey by 60%. So if you apply that on the hundreds of thousands of calls they're taking a year, that is material. And whilst I can't give you the number, what we also managed to do is upsell a number of products where a customer perhaps wasn't covered for the right things going forward. So again, it had that sort of revenue lens as well. So a bit of a sort of story related to how do we use AI for better aggregation, cleaning of data, and presenting data. But it's multifaceted and complicated, as you can imagine, but the outputs are significant.
Yeah, that's a really incredible story, actually. And I can imagine just over the number of calls that a big insurance company would get over a period of time, just the cost savings there too. But Jake, just kind of turning this conversation over to you. I don't know if you could tell us about what you're doing at Puzzle specifically to help customers build out strategies like Simon's just talked about in kind of leveraging AI.
Well, first, I was going to start by actually saying I think Simon's proved my point there. The reality is for most organizations in this market is that there's some really simple fundamental things that need to be nipped in the bud first. And the agent desktop, it always comes back to the agent desktop, but more often than not, you're finding that agents are having to navigate between 5 or 6 different systems, right, to actually help the customer and find what they're looking for. And this is what I mean. These are the simple but tangible things that can be put in place that deliver significant benefits. Because without that, the reality is that delivering AI is going to be more challenging and it's going to be less impactful for your agents. So I think it's difficult, and it's often difficult for us, by the way, as a vendor, to set the right expectation with customers. And I think actually in Simon's line of work, it's a bit easier because they're working hand in glove with the customer, often on projects where they can kind of lead by best practice. But I think that's such an important aspect. I think, put simply, to answer your question, Charlie, it hinges on outcome-based analysis. So probably no different in terms of what Simon might do, but having a deep understanding in terms of why they want to invest in AI. Why does the customer want to start looking at this kind of technology? Why now? And often we try and work with customers in a consultative manner, first to understand and uncover from their perspective on why they want to invest in AI and where they think, crucially, it's going to deliver the most value in their organization. It's always really important to understand that first point, because actually then what we'll start to do is often work hand in glove with the customer to analyze and profile their current contact demand across each channel, start to formulate an understanding of their maturity from a customer experience perspective, understand things like success rates around self-service and general customer service objectives, start to build this picture and then play this back to the customer and really give them our perspective of where we think AI is going to be most impactful for their organizations. More often than not, it doesn't always match up with what they thought initially was going to be the important focus areas for them. We like to include lots of different stakeholders in this process, anywhere from your customer services director, but also people like agents and supervisors. I've often said, I think I said it on our last video, Charlie, these people are the most important people in your organization. If you want to understand what is not working in your contact center, speak to the agents and supervisors. These guys are key to any change. They will be able to put forward the most compelling business case for why you should start to implement changes, because they're doing it day in, day out. They're living by this. So that aspect's super important. Lastly, I think we need to be real that AI is an iterative solution. So, we will always deliver in an iterative manner, and we'll often ask for the customer to actually stand up a steer co on their side, and that steer co has to be made up of different people that are empowered to make quick changes, because the reality is that's how you start to gather the benefits that AI can deliver quickly. So, for example, someone from your digital marketing team that can make quick changes on the website, someone from your senior management layer who's able to approve and rubber stamp these changes, someone from your contact center who is able to start adapting things like certain skills-based routing criteria, how you're routing these interactions to reduce things like call transfers, to Simon's point earlier in this video. So I think that aspect is really important, because you deliver these things over time. You're not just going to implement a chatbot and leave it, and it's going to continue delivering value into the future. You have to adapt it. You have to learn and progress as an organization as you start understanding and getting access to more data. I think it helps from our perspective, obviously, that Puzzle is able to deliver a complete AI solution. So from things like natural language processing, IVA, generative AI chatbots, we're often able to have quite broad conversations with our customers and people that are coming to us often asking for advice and guidance. And that's a key really to getting the most out of AI, and helping best practice, to your point. So making sure that organizations just aren't misplacing their investments or gambling in the wrong kind of technology. So that would be my kind of 2 cents on that very important question, by the way, I think.
Yeah, again, lots of really great points. I think that's actually really where Puzzle does stand out as a vendor, and that consultative approach, I think, through the Puzzle optimization program, of how you can sort of leverage not only elements of AI, but also elements of the broader CX platform. And you have that analysis at front, and then you can kind of create a continuous improvement strategy. And I'll leave a link actually to that in the description box too. But before we close off this conversation, I did know earlier that we'll talk a little bit more about compliance before we end this chat. And Simon, I'll pass this one over to you.
Thank you.
So how can insurers implement AI with with their core compliance objectives sort of in mind, if that makes sense?
I think there are multiple threads to how we're seeing AI being leveraged to support compliance, and many of them we've touched on in this conversation. But I think the historic monitoring of 3 calls per agent per week, is no longer sufficient in this current market, right? So the first thing is, how do we scale up using real-time transcription and better analytics to actually automate and reduce risk around some of those compliance activities? So I think that has to be a key priority. And by doing that, we're starting to flag non-conformity rather than trying to find a needle in a haystack, right? Which is always the risk that we've been concerned with. I think Agent Assist, where it's well designed and presented well at the right point in the conversation on an agent desktop, is actually advantageous. But what we have to bear in mind there is that we present stuff that is relevant, it's not distracting, and actually it's not undermining an agent's ability to I know how to do this. I've done this 100 times. I've always got high compliance scores. Why are you now giving me this? That's just stopping me doing my job, right? So focusing in on the gaps or the new regulations, I think, is quite interesting. We're seeing quite a bit around embedding behaviours through training. I think we can put in place the Agent Assist, we can put in place the automated quality and compliance management, but then we still, to a certain degree, rely on a conversation between the team leader and the agent, and oftentimes that's done through, role play or, in one-to-ones, which is frankly awkward for everybody and requires a agent not to feel awkward and a team leader to have the right training and skills and competence to be able to guide. So how do we create more AI-based training tools that provide perhaps a safe, zone for an agent to do their learning, or to maybe go through a digital role play type scenario where they're safe and they can experiment, and it removes those barriers. And we think that's an interesting area that the learning and development world, the L&D world, will start to embrace, and that will start to pay dividend. And I sort of close this off with a example. We worked with a large retail bank that had been really good at imposing the need for, if you're in any doubt, escalate to a second line compliance team. The consequence of that is that second line compliance team grew arms and legs and became about 2,500 people globally. So it actually became quite a large burden in itself, right? So organizations now are starting to think, how do we make the role, we've done the right thing by encouraging the appropriate escalation, but how do we more efficiently handle the volume of those compliance requests that we're receiving on the second line? And that's where we're starting to see some of that use of the LLMs and almost internal chatbots, actually, to start triaging out some of the known answers that we've given historically, and automating those away, whilst focusing the compliance officer's time on those elements that are the edge cases, the more complex, the different ones that require more attention. It's not dissimilar to the work we do with customer-facing chatbots, but that internal knowledge management layer. And as that develops, we get better and more sophisticated in our ability to answer more of those. So, but I would just close this on a generic comment that would be, I think it's really important that organizations have a clear strategy. We understand the outcomes we want to deliver, and we build customer journeys around them that actually consider both the customer's experience, the commercial outcomes we're trying to deliver, but importantly our employee and agent experience. How do we get those three legs of the stool right, and how do we make sure they're measurable and we can actually deliver those? I think we need to be really think really differently about the capabilities that we have in organizations to leverage and build new customer journeys. Have we got the right people with the right skills going forward on the front line post AI revolution, the complex rise of the knowledge worker? And this does even start to make you think about, have I got the right locations? How am I using my outsourcers going forward? There's some really awesome examples of AI translation in real time now, where historically we've had to think about putting English language agents at a higher cost in lower cost geographies. And actually, if we can start to translate in real time, do we actually need to push people out to different locations? So there's a wealth of opportunities. It is complex, and it does warrant some thinking and some coherent strategy. But actually, the upside is really compelling. But again, it just comes back to think big, start small.
Yeah, and again, lots of really great points within there, Simon. You mentioned so much within there in terms of how you can sort of engage agents within the technology, and it makes me think of all the other conversations we could have. We've already mentioned AI ethics. We've already mentioned how to kind of measure the success of AI implementations. But I think before we come up with even more topic, I think that's a great place to end today's chat. But thank you both very much. It was a super informative conversation. So thanks to both of you for joining me today. And also thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you, Charlie.